Hello, this is the first of multiple video tutorials on SQL or Structured Query Language, which is the standard language one uses to interact with relational databases. So you already know that SQL has different components to it. One is called the data definition language. So if you think of a database, you have to first create its structure, create the relations and the linkages among the relations. So the data definition language is the part of SQL that is used to create the database. Okay. And then once the database is created and populated, you work with it, meaning you operate on it, and the standard operations that you do on it is you retrieve information, you add information, like let's say a new customer has come, so you put in new customer information, and you're selling a new part in your store, you put in information about the new part. You also delete information. Let's say the part becomes obsolete and you no longer sell it, so you would delete information about the part. And you also update information, that is, you change information about certain things. For instance, the price of the part may have increased or changed or gone down, so you would go in and change the price of the part. So that portion of SQL is called the data manipulation language. That's the part of the language that's used to operate with the database. Now, there are two other aspects of SQL that we will not cover in this course. They're quite important, but we will not cover it in this introductory course. One has to do with controlling access to the database. Obviously, there are privacy issues, control issues in a database. Not everybody should be able to get at all information in the database, so that needs to be controlled. So there is a portion of SQL that deals with that kind of access control. There is another portion of SQL that deals with handling concurrent operations. So in practical databases, there are hundreds or perhaps thousands of users who are trying to get at the database at the same time. For instance, an airline reservation system, you could have hundreds of passengers trying to buy tickets at the same time, and you need a language that sort of mediates multiple people accessing data at the same time. How do you keep the data consistent and so forth? So these second two pieces we are not doing in the course. It's only these first two pieces, and of these first two pieces, this tutorial and the next, and perhaps the next one as well, maybe the first three tutorials, will focus on the data definition language. In other words, the part of SQL that is used to create a relational database. So this is the very simple example relational database that we are going to create using SQL, and this example is from your book. It's from page 136 of the 8th edition of the Cronky book. So if you like, you can go back and take a more detailed look at the structure of the database. But just for our purposes in this tutorial, this database consists of four relations. You have department, you have employee, assignment, and project. And just as a reminder, you remember the entity integrity rule and the referential integrity rule. You can go back and check on those. You can see that department, each of these relations has a primary key. You can see that by the picture of the key that you see next to those attributes. For instance, you have a primary key here, a primary key here, and a primary key here. Also notice that assignment, the primary key is composite. Okay, and there are some foreign keys as well. For instance, department in this relation project connects it to department over here. Project ID in assignment connects assignment to project, and employee number connects assignment to employee. So there are a bunch of foreign keys here as well. So this is the basic structure of the database, and we're going to create it. And in this first tutorial, we will only create one table, and then in subsequent tutorials, we will see how to connect them. So let's focus on the simplest relation that we have in this database, because everything sort of seems to start from there, the department. Now, if you think of what it takes to create this relation, we obviously must be able to specify the name of the relation. We have to be able to tell Microsoft Access what are the attributes of the relation. In other words, the column names, those are the names of the columns. And we also have to tell it the attributes of the column. That is it a numeric column? Is it a text column? And so forth. So those are the absolute basic information that we have to provide. And in addition, there can be some extra information, like if there are foreign keys, we need to tell Access, hey, this attribute is a foreign key. And obviously we have to tell it what the primary key is. So that's the basic information that one needs to specify in order to create one table. So what I'm going to do is first show you the commands in SQL on paper, and then we will actually go into Access and write them up and execute them and create the database itself gradually, step by step. Okay. All right. So for the SQL language, the three commands that are used to create relational databases are these three: create, alter, and drop. And among these three, the first one, create, is by far the one that you would use most frequently in the process of creating a relational database. So remember these three commands, that's what we will use. Okay. So the basic structure of the create command, how do you create a table? So remember, we are trying to create the department table. First, remember the basic syntax of it. So anytime you're using a computer language to do anything, syntax is important, because that is how the computer will interpret what it is you're asking it to do. Okay. So the grammar is very important. Just like when you write an English sentence, the noun comes ahead and the verb comes later and so forth. If you mess up the order, the structure of the sentence, its whole meaning gets messed up. Okay. So in the same way here, when you're using the create table command to create a relation, the grammar or the structure of the command is very important. So notice that you first start with the words create table. So these two words have to be there. Okay. So you start by saying create table, and that's how Microsoft Access knows that you're instructing it to create a relation. Okay. So it calls relations as tables in Access. And you follow that with the name of the relation. Every relation must have a name. Okay. So remember, we had that little picture of the department relation. We had the name of the department here, and then we had the names of the columns, right? So that's what we're doing in textual form here. So we say create table department, that's the name of the relation, and then we follow that up with the names of the columns or the attributes. You see, department name and budget code. Actually, there were four. Let me quickly show you. There were four attributes. Okay, if I scroll up a little bit, you can't see it very clearly, but at least you can see that there were 1, 2, 3, 4. But just to keep things simple for now, we are just looking at 2, and we will increase that to 4 attributes. So, but the basic grammar is very easy to see. You have the words create table, then you have the name of the relation, and then you have the names of the attributes. Okay. And for each attribute, you're going to tell Microsoft Access what is the property of the attribute. Here we are saying that department name is a character that's up to 35 characters long. It's an attribute that could be up to 35 characters long. Similarly, budget code could be up to 30 characters long. And then following that, we have some additional qualifications, specifications, if you will. We are telling Microsoft Access that department name is the primary key. Remember, every relation must have a primary key. Okay. And we're also saying that budget code, okay, has to be specified. It's not the primary key, but it cannot be null. So we are saying that budget key is not null. And every SQL statement ends with a semicolon. Okay. So remember that every SQL statement ends with a semicolon. All right. So let's go into Access and actually create this table using this create command. So here I have Microsoft Access. The first thing that can, so this is the sort of the opening screen that you would see when you start up Microsoft Access. Before I can create the table, I must first create the database. Okay. So I say file, and then I'm going to tell Access I want to create a database. So I pick this blank database. And then Microsoft Access says, what do you want to call the database? So your database, in our case, remember, consists of a collection of 4 relations. That those 4 relations and the linkages among them together constitute the database. So we'll give it some name. I will just call it lecture 4 tutorial 1. It's not a very imaginative name. Okay, tutorial. Okay, and I will put it in a particular folder somewhere so that I can find it later on. So let me put it in documents. You can put it anywhere you like, so I'm just putting under document so that I know where to find it. Okay, and then I say create. All right, so no tables have been created as yet, but the shell within which the relational database will be put has been created, and the name of that database is the one that you just saw, that is lecture 401 tutorial. Okay, so now we are going to create this particular table. So just to remind you, we are going to create the table department 1, okay, and using the create table command. All right, so let me go back to access. So now I click on the create tab on the menu bar, and I go to query design. All right, and access comes up with the default interface that it uses for creating queries. So, and I don't want to use that. I want to use SQL. So I close this. Okay, let me close this table. I don't need this table. Okay, so now for the query, okay, you can see this is the query by example, the graphical interface that Access uses for extracting, for interacting with the database. So I tell Access that I want the SQL view. So I go to this button over here, SQL button, and from the view, I say I want to use SQL view. Okay. So now, you see it starts with the word select. That's sort of a default. I don't want to use the word select. So here I am. I'm just going to save myself some typing, and I'll just copy this command. So I'm copying this command, and let's go over to my, you can type it out yourself if you like, but I'm just going to go over here. Okay, so here is the so just a second, close this. Okay, so here we have the create table command. So let me just remind you of the pieces of the command. We have the words create table followed by the name of the table. Now I've given it the name department 1, and you will see in a little bit why I've used the name department 1. I will create another table with the name department, and we will delete this one. So, but this is basically your department table. Okay, so you have the department name, and with the department with 35 characters long at the most, and that's the primary key. There's the budget code, and I'm saying it's not null. Okay, so this is the command, and I'm going to run this command now. So here I am. So this is exclamation mark will run the command. So I ran the command, and nothing appears to have happened, but I hope you notice that on the left hand side over here, the table, let me expand this a bit. So the table department 1 has been created. Do you see? Okay, so let's I'm going to double click on that table, and do you see those 2 columns have been created? Okay, now let me go into design view for this table. So I right click on it and go to design view to see its properties. Okay, so do you see that this key mark has been automatically put next to department name? Because in the create table command, I had specified the department name is the primary key. I told Access that department name is the primary key. And that is why when it created the table, you have this key symbol next to department name. That's why it's the primary key. Okay. And you can see over here that it is indexed and no duplicates. Duplicates are not allowed because the primary key must be unique. Okay. Similarly, for budget code, we are saying it's 30 characters long at the most, and it cannot be null. That's what we said in the create table command, right? So here we go back to the table, and I go to budget code, Do you see it set it up as 30 characters long over here? It's in the size, it says it's 30 characters long. So that's where the 30 came from. Okay. And under required, do you see it says yes? That means you have to provide a value for this field. Why does Access say that? Because in your SQL statement, you had said not null. So I hope you see the correspondence between what the table that Access has created and the create table command that was given to Access to set up this table. Okay. So now let's go back and continue with our discussion of SQL. Okay. Now, if you go back to this first table that we had created, the department one, notice where we specified the primary key. So when I wrote the department name, the name of the attribute, next to it, I said that this name, this attribute, department name, is the primary key. This seems like a natural way to say which attribute is the primary key, but there is another way to tell Access the same thing. And this another way, later on, you'll find a couple of tutorials down, that when you have composite primary keys, that becomes helpful. So let me show you the second way of specifying the primary key. You have already seen one over here. Here is the second way. Do you see? Here's the table. Okay. Up to the third line, it looks exactly the same as before. Do you see? It says create table, and then you have the name of the table, and you have the two attributes, department name, budget code. The first one is 35 characters long. The second one is 30 characters long. But now, next to the name, I don't say primary key. I just say not null. And all I'm saying is those values must be present. You must have values for department name and department code. And instead of specifying next to the name of the attribute, we have this constraint. Do you see this word? It starts with the word constraint, and we are telling Microsoft Access that, hey, department name, this attribute called department name, namely this attribute, is the primary key of the table department. Okay, so this is department name is the primary key. So the specification is given through a separate constraint. Okay, so you're saying you're telling Access the same thing that you did in the previous slide. You're telling Access that department name is the primary key of department. So why bother writing it the second way? Why not just stick with the first method? So now, suppose you have a table that has a composite primary key. Then all you have to do is say primary key and then put all the columns that are part of the primary key one after the other, separated by commas over here. Okay, so the first attribute, comma, the second attribute, comma, the third attribute. So you can specify composite keys. Okay, so now so this word constraint, just like create table, these are what are called reserved words, namely they have special meaning for Microsoft Access. Same thing, the word constraint has a very special meaning for Microsoft Access. There are many different kinds of constraints. This constraint that you see over here is a constraint to specify what the primary key is. So what I'm going to do now is create the department table again, but using this second method of specification. Okay, so I'm going to copy this command. Just a second, let me go back to Access and delete the old create command. Okay, and let me close this table. So just remember, the first table was called department 1. What I'm going to do is just copy this command over. I'm creating the same department table, but just in a slightly different way. So I copy and I paste. Okay. Oh, I need commas over here. So you'll find this yourself. SQL, just like any computer language, is very sensitive to syntax. So if you miss a comma here, a bracket there, it'll start complaining, and you just have to get proficient at writing these things to avoid those mistakes, or correct them as and when they arise. So I'm going to run this command, and what should happen is the same table should be created. Now, the reason I gave slightly different names, the first time I created it, I gave the name department 1, and this time I gave it the name department. simply because I can't have two tables with the same name in the same database. Okay, so that's why to full access I given this second table the name department, but you can see from the column names that is basically the same. Okay, so the only thing I'm trying to show you here is that we are creating the same table but using a slightly different method of specifying the primary key than what we did the first time around. So I'm going to create the table. So I click on create, query design. Let me close this. I don't want. Okay, so I have everything set up here. I'm going to run this thing now. Okay, so do you see that this department table has now been created? You had the department 1 table before, and the department table has now been created. So let's take a look. It should look exactly the same as the department 1 table. So I'm going to go into design view, and you can see the same thing. You see the primary key symbol next to department name. Okay, you have your budget code, and if I look at the data types for department name, you can see it's 35 characters long, as we specified. Here we specified 35 characters. Do you see? And then we said not null. So under required here, do you see it says yes? That means access recognizes that department name cannot be null. Okay. Similarly, if you look at the SQL statement for budget code, we had said not null, correct? So in department, if I look at budget code, under required here, it again says yes. That means you have to provide a value for budget code. Okay, so basically you have just seen let me close this panel down. So you've basically seen a slightly different way of creating the same table. The difference was that the way you specified what the primary key is a slightly different way than what we did before. Okay, so let's see now what's next here. All right, so now that you have seen how to create a table, remember, let me show you. I'll go back to an earlier slide. I think I mentioned to you that the data definition statements that are there in SQL, one is the create command, is what we have been seeing so far. The other two are alter and drop. I want to show how these two work. And I think you can guess how they work. Alter, you use the alter command to change the properties of a table that has already been created. All right, so you want to alter the table in some way. And some of the alterations that you might do is you might want to add a column to the table. You might want to delete a column from the table. You might want to make a column wider, that is from, let's say it was 30 characters long. You might want to make it 100 characters long. Okay, those kinds of changes you might want to do. Those are alterations. The other thing that you might want to do is to drop objects from the database. For example, you may want to drop a column from a relation. You may want to drop a complete relation from a database. You might want to delete it altogether. Okay, so dropping is like deleting, altering is like updating, and creation is like adding, is what we have just been seeing. So let me go back to that example that we had and show you how the alter and drop operations work. So here we are, we go back. So this is the syntax. Okay, so just like your previous one for create table, you say drop table. You start with the word drop, follow it with the word table, and then you specify the name of the table that you want to drop. Let's say I want to delete department 1. All right, so if you go back to access, remember I told you that department 1 was sort of a fake table I had created just to show you two different ways of creating the same table. So I'm going to get rid of the department 1 table now. Okay, so here let me set up the command. So I'll just save myself some typing, and I'll say drop table department 1. I copy. Okay, so there's the command. Okay, and I need to create. Okay, so I need to go to create, query design, close out this dialog box. So here I am. So I'm basically going through these steps just to get the run command back on the screen. So this is drop table department 1. So as soon as I run this command, okay, you will see that department 1, this table will disappear, okay, from the database. The database now consists of these two relations, department and department 1. And let me run this, and you can see department 1 disappeared. It got dropped, okay. So that's like that's how the drop operation works, okay. Now in this case we dropped an entire table. You may not want to drop an entire table. You may want to drop a column within an existing table. So we'll see those examples in just a bit. So let me delete this and come back to the PowerPoint slide. Let's go on to the next example over here. So let's say, remember the let's go back to the original picture that we had of the database. So let me see if I can blow this up a little bit. So if you look at the department table, it had 4 columns, 4 attributes. It had department name, budget code, office number, and department phone. And out of these 4 columns, we had only put in 2 just to save ourselves typing. So what we are going to do is go back to the department table and alter it and add these 2 new columns, okay? So we're going to alter this table by adding 2 columns. So look at the syntax for it. So here's the command. So I'm showing this to you manually, then we'll go and actually do it. It says alter table. So you would actually have to write the word alter table, give the name of the table, and then you say add these 2 columns. Do you see it says add office number, and we're saying that it is 10 characters long and it cannot be null. That's what we are specifying. We are saying that if you have an office, you must give an office number. Now, you might have chosen not to give that specification. So if you want to allow an office number to remain null, you don't have to say not null. But we are assuming that it doesn't make sense to have an office without an office number. So that's why we are saying not null. Okay. But the most important thing here is alter table, the command, the structure of this the command. So I'm just going to copy this. Copy. Let me go over, paste it. Okay. And I try to run it. And immediately it says, do you see it says syntax error in alter table? This will happen all the time. It's not possible for anyone to remember the exact grammar of all commands. So you'll remember a lot of it, and maybe perhaps most of it. But there will be occasions when you make a mistake in terms of syntax, which is what I have just done. So Access comes back and says there is some grammatical mistake in what you have done. Okay. So I hit OK, and Access tries to show you approximately where the mistake might lie. Okay. It's sort of trying to jog your memory. And as soon as I see this, I know what mistake I have made. So I need to take this word add out and put a comma here. Okay. So look at the syntax. I say alter table, give the name of the table, and then I'm saying add the first column, which is office number, and then add the second column, which is department phone. Okay. So hopefully this will work. All right. So again, just as a reference, I'm going to open the department table. At the moment, it has only 2 columns, right? Okay. So let me close this. At the moment, it has only 2 columns. So I'm going to run this. Just a moment. Let me get back the run command. So here I have the run command back. I'm going to run this, and it looks like nothing has happened, but let me open the department table now. So do you see that it now has 4 columns? So these 2 columns that we just added, the office number and the department phone, have been added. These 2 columns have been added to the relation. Okay. So that is what this alter table command has done. All right. So let me close this. Down, and we'll come back to the PowerPoint file. And here's another one. Okay, so office number, do you see when we had created an office number, we had set it up as 10 characters long, right? Character 10. So suppose I change my mind and I say, well, the office number could be longer because it has extensions and so forth. So maybe I want to change it to be 15 characters long. All right. So the column exists. All I want to do is change it from 10 characters to 15 characters. So again, I would use the alter table command. So I'll say alter table, give the name of the table, and then I tell Access, hey, alter this particular column, make it 15 characters wide. Okay. So let me try and do that. I will delete this fellow. Okay. Get the query design form here. Okay, I got the run command back. I go back to the PowerPoint slide and then I'll just copy this, save myself some typing. Copy, go back to Access, pasted the command. Just to make it look nice, I will just shift it over. Notice that it always ends with a semicolon and what you call an SQL command. Okay, so I'm now going to run it, and what should happen is within this table department, the column which is called office number, instead of being 10 characters long, should now become 15 characters long. Okay, excuse me. Let me just show you the design view. You can see the office number is 10 characters long, right? Do you see it says 10 characters long? So after I execute this command, it should become excuse me, 15 characters long. So I close this. Excuse me. So create, I'm going to get the run command back actually, that's why I'm doing this. I close. So I'm going to run this command. So I just ran the command. Let me go back to department, look at design view and go to office number. Do you see now that it has become 15 characters long because I told Microsoft Access to alter the width of that column to 15 characters. So this is how you would use the alter command. Okay, so let me close this tab. I go back to the PowerPoint slide. So just like so, you can drop a column. So office number. Okay, so suppose I use this, I take this particular command, alter table department drop office number. I think you can guess by now what this command would do. All this command would do is take the column office number and delete it from the table called department. Okay, so we go back to Access. Let me delete this old SQL command. Here is the new one. I put the semicolon. So just to confirm for you, this office number, this column called office number is still here, is there. Okay, office number. All right. So I'm going to run this now. So let me first get the run command back. I go to create, query design. I close this dialog box and I run this command. And now if I open department, do you see that budget code is gone now? You don't have that column anymore. Okay, so that's how the drop column works. So just as a summary, what I've shown you is how to use the create, alter and drop commands from SQL to create one table and to enforce the entity integrity rule, that is setting up the primary key and saying that it is unique and not null. Okay, so in subsequent videos we will see how to set up a table with composite primary keys and then how to set up foreign keys and so forth. Okay.